Hi, my name is Jera Brandvig and I am a designer for Lecien. Today I will be showing you how to make these cute tote bags using fabric from my second collection called the Conner. I will be showing you how to make this patchwork style tote bag. However, if you want to have a tote bag with a quicker finish, you can always just skip the patchwork and just do one full fabric panel instead. I used to think that tote bags seemed really hard to make. There was usually always one step that seemed very confusing, so I usually just kind of shied away from making them. However, my goal for this video tutorial is to show you that tote bags are actually quite simple to make and they're really fun too. And before you know it, you'll be sewing up tote bags in no time. That being said, let's get started. So I'm going to be telling you the materials you need to make the patchwork tote. So first you will need 2 quilted patchwork panels that measure 20 inches by 15 inches, and I quilted these onto soft and stable batting. I will show you in a little bit how to make these. In addition, you will need your lining fabric for your tote. You will also need 2 20 by 15 inch lining panels, and the rule of thumb is you want your lining to match the size of your panels. In addition, for my tote, I added a pocket. This is optional, so you don't have to do this, but if you want to add a pocket, you will need 2 rectangles that measure 6 by 8 inches. And I decided to jazz up the outside of my pocket with just leftover scrap pieces, so you can do that if you want, and I'll show you how to do that. In addition, you will need 2 straps that measure 1 inch by 30 inch. And I'm going to show you how to wrap those straps in fabric, so if you decide to do that, you will need 2 rectangle strips that measure 4 inches by 30 inches long. So I'm going to show you how to make this patchwork panel. So what we first want to do is start off by laying out 4-inch squares. And you're going to first make a row and make sure that your squares are tilted in a way so that they look like a diamond. So you're going to start out with one row with 4, and then you're going to do another row here right underneath it. This row has 5, and you will need a total of 31 4-inch squares to make one panel here. And since you'll be making 2 panels, you'll need that times 2. And so now this is the part where you get to take a look and see if you want to rearrange anything. So, you know, if you feel like you have too many blues next to each other, you can always swap something out. That, and just take a look. And this takes some time, but it's also a lot of fun because this is how you get to design how you want the front of your bag to look like. So here you just get to really just play around and take a step back and just see what looks best to you. But yeah, so there you have it, and then you just rearrange them to whatever looks best to you. And then next we will be sewing these together in rows. So this is one row, this is another row. This is your 3rd row, 4th row, 5th row, 6th, and 7th. So you're going to start by sewing each square together in each row, and then we'll sew the rows together, and I'll show you that in a minute. So here is an example of my squares that have been partially sewn together. As you can see here, I started by sewing the squares within each row together. So here's one row, here's another, and then here's the rest that are already put together. Once you sew your squares within each row together, then you are going to press them so that they lay flat, and be sure to press the seams in alternating directions. So for example, I press these seams facing this way, and these seams going that way, this way, this way, and so forth, so that your seams nest when you assemble the rest of the patchwork. So the next step that I'll do here is sew this row right there, and then I will sew this row, and then I will show you how to square it up. So here we have our patchwork all sewn together. I've used a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew all the squares together, and then I just press it flat with an iron. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to trim all these corners off so that we have a rectangle to use for our panel. And to do that, what you're going to do is take a ruler and you are going to line it up with the corners here of these squares because we are going to cut right here. So I'll show that. So I'm going to line up the edge of my ruler with this corner, and I'm going to do the same for right up here. And as you can see here, there's approximately 1/4 inch seam left here for these two middle pieces when you do that. Okay, once those are all lined up, then we cut. And don't throw away these little corner pieces because you can use them to do some patchwork for your pocket lining if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for this side. So put it there. And again, I'm going to line up my ruler with the corner, with the bottom corner here and the top corner here. Just like that. Make sure to check it twice before you cut. Trim those off. Set those pieces aside for later. And then you're going to repeat here and here as well. So you're going to want to make 2 of these. And then next I will show you how to quilt it. So here I have my patchwork panel all squared up and ready to quilt. The next step is to take some soft and stable batting. I really like this batting because it actually has sort of a foam-like feel to it, and it really gives a professional finish when you've after you've quilted. As you can see here, it kind of makes the quilting pop. And it also provides your tote bag with structure because it helps it to stand upright. And you can find this soft and stable batting at Back Order Shop. It's a really great product and easy to work with. So the next step here is to quilt this onto your soft and stable batting. And when you do that, you can just, iron this nice and flat, and then you can place a few pins. You really don't need that many. And then what I did is I quilted just simple straight lines along the seams. You can kind of see what I did here. And the thread that I used to quilt is thread from my Lecien collection thread set. The color that I used is this cream color. However, any of these colors would blend in flawlessly. So after you've quilted it, the next step is to trim off any excess batting so that it looks like this. And then you'll want to go ahead and make 2 of these. Next, I'm going to be showing you how to make the straps for your bag, and you will need to make 2 straps that are each 30 inches in length and 1 inch wide. So to do that, I'll show you how to make one. So what you do is you start out with this bag strapping. So this one is 30 inches long by 1 inch. And then for the fabric you'll need a 4 inch wide strip by 30 inch long. And we are going to use this to wrap our strap. However, if you want to do a wider strap, what you need to do is just get fabric that is 4 times the width of your strap. So for example, this strap is 1 inch. So 1 times 4 is 4. So this is 4 by 30 inches. If you decide that you want to do a wider strap, for example, here this is 1.5. What you'll do is 1.5 times 4. So you'll need to do 6 inches by 30. Okay, so the first step in wrapping our strap with fabric is to take your fabric strip, and we are just going to iron it in half lengthwise. Just iron it all the way down the length. Just like that. And then you're going to open it back up, and then you are going to iron both of these ends inward so that it touches that center crease that you just ironed. And then you're going to repeat on the other side. And then you're going to fold it in half just like that. And you can go ahead and give it one more iron, one more press. And then to make your strap nice and sturdy, what we're going to do is insert our 1-inch strapping inside. So you'll open it back up, and then I'm just going to insert it right into here. Just like that. And you don't have to worry about how the ends look, because those are going to be hidden later when you sew them into your bag. So just like that. And then fold that over. And then you can just press it so that everything lays nice and flat. And just do that all the way down the length. And then lastly, what you're going to do is just sew a line going right down here and a line going right down there. And I sewed mine approximately 1/8 inch from the edge, as shown here. I used a walking foot and a 2.5 stitch length. And so when you're finished, your straps will turn out looking like this. So now that we've finished our straps, the next step is to sew them onto our quilted panels. And to do that, you just take one strap, and what I like to do is attach them approximately 4 to 5 inches inward. So here, about 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll just pin it right here. So you're going to just want to pin it down. And then I'll do the same here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll pin this one in place. And you're going to want to make sure that before you sew, just make sure that your handle is not twisted. So these are both facing upward, and then you have your nice handle right there. So I'm going to pin this down, and then I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and then just sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you can go over it several times. I usually do about 3 or 4 times just to make sure it's in there securely. And then you are going to repeat on your other panel. So next I'm going to show you how to add a pocket to the lining of your tote bag. And this step is completely optional, so you can choose not to do it if you want, but if you do, here's how to do it. So for my front of my pocket, I decided to do this cute half square triangle patchwork. And I did this using the scraps left over from the patchwork bag that I showed previously. And to do that, I basically just took 2 triangles with right sides facing together. I stitched a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like this. 1/4 inch seam allowance, pressed it open, and then you just snip off those corners, and then I just did 2 rows with 3 half square triangles each. And this came out to measure approximately 6 by 8. And so then I also cut out a lining piece to match that. But really you can have your pocket be whatever size you want. And then to finish up the pocket, you're going to take your lining piece and place it on top with the right sides facing together. You're going to start sewing right around here. Be sure to start with a back stitch and just sew around the perimeter. And then end right about here to leave yourself approximately a 2-inch opening so that you can turn it right side out. Be sure to end with another back stitch. Before you turn this right side out, be sure to just snip off the bulk from the corners, and then you are going to turn it right side out and then press flat with an iron, and then you can close up that hole using web fusing. So here I got my 2 lining pieces. My lining pieces both measured 20 by 15. And I have my pocket, which I've already sewn onto the lining. As you can see here, there's the inside of the pocket with that lining piece. And then I just went ahead and sewed my pocket approximately 4 inches down, and then just centered it. Now, before we sew our 2 lining pieces together, what you want to just make sure you do is make sure that the size of your lining pieces match the size of your quilted panels. Because depending on how you quilted your panels might have shrunk a little bit, maybe by 1/8 to 1/4 inch. It shouldn't be much, but so whatever that your panel size ended up being, you just want to make sure that your lining matches that. So this would be the time to go ahead and trim that down if needed. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to sew your lining pieces together. So what you want to do is put them on top of each other so that the right sides are facing together. I'm just going to smooth it out with my hand, but you can always use an iron. Like that. And then we are going to cut out squares on the corners here to make our box corners. And so to do that, I am just going to take a ruler and cut a 2 1/4 inch square out. So I'm going to mark that first. It's right about here. And I'll do the same over here. So 2 1/4. And these box corners are what help allow your tote bag to stand upright. Next, I'm going to cut these out. So just take some fabric scissors, cut them out like that. Okay, and the next part is sewing. And I'm just going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And sew right along here. Make sure to start and end your stitch with a back stitch. So you'll sew here. And then you're also going to sew on the bottom, but what you want to make sure you do is leave approximately a 7 inch opening here, because this is where you're going to turn everything right side out at the very end. So I would just start right about here, so here to here, and make sure to start and end that stitch with a back stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those pieces together over at the sewing machine, and then I'll come right back and show you how to finish sewing up the box corners. So here we have my 2 lining pieces, and I've already sewn them as discussed previously. And so now I'm going to show you how to sew the box corners so that they look like this. So we'll go back over to that 2 1/4 inch corner that we cut out. 2 1/4 inch square corner that we cut out. And to make the box corner, what you do is you just basically pull it open here at this corner. So you just pull it open like that. And then you're going to want to line up the raw edges and then make sure that those seams are aligned. And what I do is I just go over to the sewing machine and just finger press these seams so that they're facing different directions and so that they nest nicely, and that just helps everything to line up nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this, and then I'll take it over to the sewing machine and then stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Be sure to start and end your stitch with a back stitch, and then it'll look like that. And we are going to repeat this same process but on your quilted panels. So right sides facing together. Make sure that the handles are out of the way. You're going to pin them up so that they stay on top of one another. And then just like we did with the lining, you're going to cut a 2 1/4 inch square out of each corner. And then you're going to sew here. Make sure to start and end your stitch with a back stitch. And then you're also going to sew on the bottom, and the only difference is here you don't you do not need to leave an opening. So you're just going to go ahead and sew all the way across. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine and do that, and then I'll be right back and show you how to finish up your bag. So as you can see here, we have our 2 quilted panels that we've stitched together on the sides and the bottom, no opening here, as well as our box corners that we've stitched up, as shown here. In addition, we have our bag lining that we've stitched up, and we have our box corners, and here on this one we have our opening. So the next step is to put the lining inside the bag. So we're going to actually just keep the bag like this with the wrong side facing out and the patchwork and the handles on the inside. And then what we're going to do is we want to have right sides facing together. So we are going to turn our lining right side out like that, and then place it right inside our bag. And then what you're going to want to do is pin this all the way around the top. And what I like to do when I pin is start by pinning at the seams here on the corners to make sure it lines up with your bag. So start by pinning here, like that, as well as pinning this side, making sure the seams align. And then you're going to want to pin the rest of the sides here and here. And I like to use Wonder clips when pinning here. Just clip them just so you don't have little pokies sticking out. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do, so after you've pinned the corners and then clip these sides here, you're going to take it over to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance all around your bag. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and do that right now, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I am back from sewing my lining to my tote bag. So I went ahead and sewed a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around the perimeter. And so the next step is to find that opening in your lining here, and you're going to turn the bag right side out. So just reach in there and get it out, and don't worry about wrinkling it up because you can always iron it at the end. Okay, it's starting to look more like a bag. And you can just pop those box corners out like that. There. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is you're going to want to seal up that opening here. And so what you can do, what I did is I just went ahead and went over to the sewing machine, just turned it in 1/4 inch to line up with the rest of the seam, and then I just stitched it closed. But you can also use stitch witchery, which is that fusible webbing, and then just iron it closed as well. And then the very last step is to just turn this over there so that it lays nice and flat, and you're going to just take it over to your ironing board and press it so that the lining stays flat on this edge all around, just like how it is here. This is the finished bag. And then lastly, you are going to just stitch a top stitch going all the way around the edge so that it lays nice and flat and stays that way. And that's it. Once you've done that step, then you have completed your Lecien tote, and you have this super cute tote that's great for on the go. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.